and welcome back to this week's episode of the CeMAP Study Podcast, where every single week, me and my best friend Maria, also known as the Money Muggle, get together and help you guys with your CeMAP studies. This week, we are going to be talking about... What are we going to be talking about? Oh, it's CeMAP 2 and 3 week.
Topic 13.
Topic 13. Unlucky for some. It should have been a bingo colour.
Why unlucky?
I don't know, that's just the phrase. It's unlucky for some. That's what they say when they call out 13 at bingo. Unlucky for some. It's like legs 11.
Bingo.
Oh, well, that's going to have to change. Anyway, this week we're going to be talking about topic 13, which is basically stuff that can affect a property value. And there's more things than you would think. So if this is the first time you're ever tuning into this podcast or watching this, the first thing I'll say is stop what you're doing and go back to either the first episode of this season or the first episode of the last season. Basically, season 3 is all things CeMAP 1. Season 2 is all things CeMAP 2 and 3, which might sound backwards, but there's a reason for it. So start from the top of whichever season you're going to listen to. The whole idea is I couldn't get CeMAP qualified for love nor fucking money.
Yep.
And I figured I can't be alone. So I started a community, which then turned into a business. And part of that business is this podcast, where I just want to help as many people as possible get CeMAP qualified. So if you are listening to this for the first time, please press subscribe if it's on Spotify or on YouTube, or if it's on the website, go and find us on one of those things, because your subscriptions make a big difference to what we can do.
It means we keep doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Every time we get a new subscriber button,
we get excited.
We cheers.
Yeah,
we pour a drink. And I would like to become a functioning alcoholic. So
keep going.
Onwards, before we go any further, actually, Maria, could you
cue intro music?
Okay, so this week's episode is topic 13 of the CeMAP 2 and 3 textbook. Guys, please remember that there is no divide in CeMAP 2 and 3, so everything that you study, all 29 chapters of the textbook in CeMAP 2, is the same material for CeMAP 3. A lot of people message me and they go, where's the divide?
Yeah.
There isn't one. You're going to need all of it. And this one is a really important topic. I think there's a potential people are going to get loads of questions on this one as well.
Ooh.
So we're going to take it slow. Things that affect, don't make it dirty, things that affect the value of a property. Maria, I've given you no prep for this topic, as per usual.
Dirty. Things that can affect the cost of a property. How big it is?
Size, yeah, of course, is a very important one. When we're talking about houses. Size is important. Can you give me any other things?
Where it is.
Location.
Yeah.
And that was point number 1 on my notes, so well done. Location is massively important. You used to live in Liverpool, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Liverpool is known for being a very beautiful city.
Yes.
But also can be known for being a bit of a shithole.
A total shithole.
Did you find that when you were looking for properties, because you rented, so it's slightly different, but did you find that there was a big discrepancy when it came to location?
Yeah, 100%. So initially we looked around places that we liked, and then realised very swiftly that budget was a huge factor, which shouldn't be a surprise, but it was almost like a street's difference would make the difference. It was like postcodes as well. So you'd go from like an L1 postcode, central.
Yeah.
And we ended up in like an L18 postcode, which was still a really nice place.
Yeah, it was pretty central. Oh, Maria did
I'm
not
so
turn
sorry.
her phone off.
I didn't turn my phone off. It was just a vibration. So it was almost like one street's difference, but also that street's difference would make the difference between. I'd definitely walk down that, and the 2, I definitely fucking wouldn't.
Yeah, in winter, I'm staying indoors.
Yeah, I'm locking my car doors.
The location is, obviously it's important because everybody wants to live in a nice place, but it's almost even more important when it comes to buy-to-let properties.
Yeah.
Because if you're not from the area and you want to buy a house to rent and you don't know anything about that area, you might look at a house and go, that's a fucking bargain.
Mm.
But the reality is actually you can't get the same rental income from that property
as you can
as one that you might get closer to the centre, which might be out of your budget. So location is always a really important one. Lenders will consider the location when they're valuing a property. So if you decided you wanted to buy a house in Liverpool, they would send somebody out to do a valuation, which we don't talk about too much in this topic, but one of the things that they'll look at is it decent value for money based on the location?
Okay.
Actually, the best way that you can check that out is to check other property prices on the same street.
Makes
so
sense.
there's been instances of, do you remember Steve and Hannah?
Yeah.
Their house was the first house built on their street. So when
Yeah.
on the side of that hill. So when they bought it, it was relatively affordable. But then a couple of neighbouring houses cropped up for a wedge of money, and their house price went up spectacularly.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Not because anything had changed with their house, but because
the area cost had increased.
Exactly.
Yeah, we found that my childhood home. Same thing. A couple of houses had extensions, had a loft conversion added, and all of a sudden our childhood home had gone from like $500,000 to $750,000 because just the road price had increased so massively.
Exactly. So location is important because it directly affects the property value, which if it's your own home and you've decided you want to live there anyway, is not that much of a big deal.
No.
But if it's a buy-to-let investment or any type of property investment, it's a really big consideration that lenders are going to look at. So that's point number one. Point number two is something called vacant possession, which everybody falls over in their CeMAP studies. So I'm going to try and break this down.
Okay.
Vacant possession. First time you're probably ever hearing those two words put together.
Yeah.
Break it down. What do you think it means?
Well, if it's to do with property, I'd assume it is vacant, empty, possession, ownership.
Exactly. So is that house empty when you put it up for sale? Which might sound like a ridiculous
It does sound
concept,
really ridiculous.
But there's two things that can happen. There is something called an assured short hold tenancy agreement.
Wow, try saying that after a few whiskies.
I cannot, I've tried.
Yeah.
So an assured short hold tenancy agreement, or an AST, is not a bad thing, because what it means is you're selling a house that is a rental property. You have a tenant in there that would like to stay for the next 12 months. So when you put that property on the market, you will receive rent immediately.
Okay.
You don't have to do anything.
So vacant possession isn't always the gold standard, because if someone's buying... So if I was buying a property that I wanted to rent out, it's like buying a business.
Yeah.
It's essentially, that's what you're doing, isn't it?
It's exactly
They're going,
that.
we can sell you the house, but we've also insured your rental income for the next 12 months.
Exactly. So vacant possession, if you're buying a property for yourself, you obviously want vacant possession. An assured short hold tenancy, if you're going to live in the house, might get real awkward real quick.
Very uncomfortable.
So buy-to-let landlords don't mind buying houses with an assured short hold tenancy agreement.
Yeah,
that is different from a sitting tenant. A sitting tenant is effectively a squatter who doesn't want to leave.
Oh.
It can be difficult to get people out of rental properties, in a sense of if they just stop paying their rent and don't do anything, the legal process of having them physically removed from the property is really difficult. I had a student on my masterclass course last week who was talking about her mum had a rental property, and she'd rent it out to two sisters. They were twins. They were a bit kooky, was the phrase that she used. Stopped paying their rent. It went through the courts. The court said, yeah, you got to move out. We're going to evict you. It got to the point where the police had to turn up to remove them, and they had locked themselves in the attic and refused to come out of the attic.
What the fuck?
It was like a Jane Austen all over again.
Yeah.
And the police basically had to wait them out. They were like, people have needs. They're going to have to come out of the attic at some point.
I'm assuming they eventually.
Eventually, yeah. But it took them a few days.
Christ.
So a assured short hold tenancy agreement is a good thing. It can potentially make a property more attractive to a buy-to-let landlord.
Yeah.
That is not the same as a sitting tenant.
Sitting tenant's problem.
A lender
AST,
wouldn't lend on a sitting tenant property. They also wouldn't lend on a residential property purchase if you had an assured short hold tenancy agreement, because there's a conflict there. So if you want to live in the property, they're not going to take a tenant already sat in there.
That makes sense. So yeah, it's depending on what you're purchasing or selling the property.
Exactly.
Depends on what you're looking at in terms of sitting tenants, vacant possession.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Other things that can affect property value are going to be things like the class of title. So I don't know if we've spoken about this yet, but it's the idea of how sure are you that you are the owner of that house when you sell it? And actually, you laugh, but it happens where sometimes people fake documents for empty properties and sell them and fake them as their own. So it happened with a guy who had lived in the south all of his life, had bought land on the outskirts of Surrey, I think.
Yeah.
Moved abroad, kept the land as an investment, and then got an email from a school friend that was like, dude, I didn't know you'd sold that plot of land. They've got like offices on there. He had, in fact, not sold that plot of land.
Oh.
He came back, somebody had faked ownership of the land, they'd forged the documents, the sale had gone through to a company who'd built offices on there.
Shit.
He took them to court, and the court were like, it's his land, you've got to knock it down, give it back. And that's where title indemnity insurance comes in.
Right. So you can take steps to protect yourself.
Yeah, because most solicitors, as a matter of course, will take out title indemnity insurance, which just means should somebody else step forward and claim legal ownership, the insurance policy will pay out. But if you think how many people buy houses, everybody pays for that type of insurance. The risk is fairly small.
It's the same. Yeah, it's the standard. That's the gold standard with insurance, isn't it? You're just betting that not many people are going to claim versus how many people pay. So
exactly, but lenders do like absolute title, which is basically here is all the documents to provide that I'm a legal owner. If they can't provide that, then they might ask for an insurance policy or for other steps to be taken. But they could ultimately turn around and decide not to lend. And that's what this topic is about. That there's always a potential for them to say, actually, we don't want to lend on that property. And that, for mortgage advisors, well, it's not just a sticking point, it's the stopping point.
That's the whole point of their job.
Exactly. Other things which I just brush past are things like boundary disputes. They can cause really long delays when buying a property, which as a mortgage advisor can be super frustrating because you don't get your, not commission, but you don't get your payment.
Everything's on hold.
Until everything's completed. So that can be quite frustrating and also quite lengthy.
Something to pay attention to. I remember my grandparents had it. They had a boundary dispute. The previous owners had a boundary dispute with the neighbours.
Yep.
They thought it had settled. My dad said, don't buy it. It's going to be a problem. And then it was shockingly a problem.
Yeah.
So Grandpa just purchased a portion of their garden. Put a new boundary in.
That's the way to do it. Other things to make a note of are going to be how your land is owned. So you remember we spoke about the difference between freehold and leasehold and common hold?
Yes.
One is where you own the land outright. One is where you're effectively leasing the land and you have like not a rental agreement, but you have a lease period.
Yeah.
And then the third one is the common hold one, which is where you're all joint owners and you will have a committee and try and look after it. Leasehold properties can be tricky to get mortgages on.
Okay.
Because every lender will want to see a minimum 30 to 40 years beyond the mortgage term. Okay. So if you're taking out a 30-year mortgage, the lender is going to want to make sure that you have at least 60 to 70 years left on the lease.
Yeah.
Most properties come with 99 years plus, but if you don't, you then get into a point where, okay, you need to extend the lease, but that costs money, so do you extend the lease before you sell it?
It becomes much more annoying.
Or do you get the new buyer to extend the lease, but generally lenders won't lend unless there's a minimum lease term, so that...
It becomes a bit stickier.
Yeah, it does become a bit stickier. And actually, flats and apartments as a whole can generally be more difficult to mortgage. For one of the reasons is leasehold. Another reason could be if it's above a shop and you don't know what's going to happen to the shop, that can affect it. The third one is cladding.
Okay.
So we all know about what happened with Grenfell Tower.
Yeah.
And off the back of that, basically what happened is everybody realised that people had been putting cladding on the side of apartment buildings that was flammable.
Yeah.
The shit thing about that scenario in particular, obviously after the awful thing that happened, is that they said, okay, we'll just go after the builders because they knew about it when they built it, but all the builders just liquidated their businesses, so there was nobody to take to court.
Fuck.
So nobody's been held accountable for it, and it's now left all these people that live in apartments where the cladding is flammable. They can't sell their properties because
no one's going to lend on
nobody's going to buy it. But every single apartment owner would have to pitch in to get the cladding redone. So it's like turning around. If you imagine the blocks of apartments that's like 150 people, it would be turning around trying to then organise 150 people to each pay 10 grand each to get the cladding on the entire building done. Not everybody, I mean, I don't know how much it costs, but not everybody's going to have the disposable income to pay for that.
It's a huge amount of money.
So those people are stuck, and what happens is if you are dealing with a client who wants to buy an apartment, you will have to get a particular document. Cannot for the life of me remember the name of it right now.
But
an EWS. An external wall system survey or something like that, but it's an EWS 1 form.
Right.
And it basically says we're going to go out, we're going to assess the cladding, we're going to decide either whether it's flammable or if it's not flammable, and that will dictate whether or not the lender will lend on it.
Jesus.
So that's another sticking problem when it comes to
for apartments, so for buildings or properties and apartments, that's a huge concern.
And actually construction as a whole is a big one, because you look at things like log cabins. We keep looking at log cabins to buy because that's our dream, but you can't mortgage them.
Yeah.
So you have to buy them with cash, as nice as a log cabin might sound. They say, look, well, one, it's a really big risk because if there's a fire and everybody wants a log burner in a log cabin, done. I say that, I would absolutely have a log cabin. But also they don't know how long that structure is going to last. Whereas at least with a standard build property,
you have a history of
evidence to say it should last about this long.
Yeah. So I mean, the reality is you build a log cabin, don't expect to ever sell it unless it's to a cash buyer.
Yeah, cash buyers, which is great if you've got the cash, because then you get to live in a log cabin, but I don't think there's a niche there for mortgage advisors.
No, I don't.
I could be wrong. Somebody might prove me wrong and send me the link.
I'd love that.
Yeah, me too.
I would really
In which case, come and find us, because we want to mortgage log cabins. Have you ever heard of a prefab?
Yeah.
What's your understanding of a prefab?
Huff houses.
A what now?
A huff house.
A huff?
Or a huff house. I don't know how you say it.
A huff house sounds like something dodgy.
Yeah, so there was one on Grand Designs. They are basically prefab German build houses. So they build the parts of the house in Germany, and then they load it all to wherever it's being built, and it's essentially the build time for the property is like a fraction of a bricks and mortar property. So you essentially have to have a concrete base poured, and then it's
like an IKEA flat pack house.
It kind of is. It all slots together, but there's no difference, like wear-wise or whatever. They provide guarantees, warranties, etc., etc. And the episode of Grand Designs, because obviously it's a German company, they ship the lorries, the workers, everything you need, and the thing that held it up was the British concrete company who were 20 minutes down the road. They were late and then just didn't turn up. So you had a full team of like 30 German workers who'd schlepped it from Germany the night before with like 5 lorry loads of prefab housing. And the fucking concrete pourers from East London were like, yeah, we're not going to make it. So can we do tomorrow?
Wow. So, whilst that was a very good story.
Sorry, not what you were after.
No, because the prefab houses that the textbook talks about are, I don't know if you've ever seen one of these, Maria, and I'm not making assumptions based on the fact that you grew up down south. That sounds but posh. Have you ever seen prefab housing on council estates? I'm going to show you a picture.
No.
I will show you a picture, and if I can find a way to load one into this video so that you guys who are watching on YouTube can see, I'll make it pop up somewhere on the screen in a second. And
it'll be somewhere here.
Yeah. They look like normal houses, but they've got that like pebbly surface to the front of them.
Right.
Basically, after World War II, everybody came home from the war and was missing a certain type of action, which they then got, and then everybody got pregnant all at once.
Baby boom.
There was a massive housing shortage.
Yeah.
So the government said, okay, let's just build houses. Let's just fucking build them.
Throw them up.
So they built something called prefabs or prefabricated houses as temporary structures that had like a 50-year shelf life on them.
Okay.
That 50-year shelf life has now gone. We have ceased. There are still prefabs around. The one that I was born in still exists. I can still drive past it. Generally, you can't mortgage them
because they're past
sell
by date.
So, and there is a tricky exam question with this one, and I don't know what the question is, but people keep saying they had one and they weren't sure. So I think it's something to do with if a prefabricated house has had full remedial work done to say that it is now a normal house structure, which you can do.
Yeah.
Can you mortgage it? In which case, yes. But if it's just a prefab house that's had no work done,
no,
you can't mortgage them because they're past their sell-by date.
Okay. I can see Liv putting a question like that in. If John and Amy own a prefab and have had no work done to it, what will the lender offer them?
Bugger all.
Fuck all.
Yes, it won't be worded like that in your exam.
No, it won't be.
So construction is really, really important. And the last one, and we always say this is not a comprehensive study guide, but actually we've fair cracked through this topic. The last one is to do with flooding.
Which is quite topical.
It is, because
everywhere's
floods,
wet at the minute.
We all know about those towns that flood every single year. It's like every year the whole village has to get together, sandbag, and then rebuild the community.
Yeah.
And those houses, it is only going to get worse. Whether or not you believe in global warming, and I will happily say, if you don't believe in global warming, just unsubscribe, you fucking morons. But houses are flooding more and more. The houses that have always flooded are now flooding even worse.
More regularly.
The houses that have never flooded before,
flooded.
Houses that have never flooded before are now flooding more frequently because we built houses on floodplains. And
Smart.
Lenders are now getting more strict about it. So
that's fair.
I know somebody who recently wanted to buy a house. Nice Welsh village, has never flooded, no signs of flooding. The lender came back and said, we're not going to lend on it because it's built on a floodplain, even though there has never been. And
that's crazy.
And for me, doing this job, I was like, dude, just find another house.
Yeah.
They, in fact, just found another lender.
Okay.
But it is a massive risk, and I would say to anybody, like, do an education piece on this, because unfortunately, it is a problem that's only going to get worse. There's something called a reinsurance scheme, or it's called the flood re-scheme.
Yeah.
And people keep getting exam questions on this, so I'm going to try and cover it in a little bit of detail. But the idea is, there are certain homes that if they meet specific criteria, they are covered through the flood reinsurance scheme, which is government-backed because basically no insurers wanted to insure those houses.
Which you can understand why. They're a massive risk. You know at some point it's going to get wet, you're going to have to pay.
So the government stepped in and said, you have to insure these properties. They have to be insured. And it basically works off your council tax band as to how much your premiums will be.
Right.
Premiums that you pay to insure your house get paid into this scheme, which will then support any claims that are made.
Right, okay.
But interestingly, the scheme only runs for 25 years from the day that it was announced or released, which was, I'm not actually sure the exact day, I think it was about 10 years ago. Why do you think 25 years is significant?
Because wherever's flooding is going to be fucking underwater by the time it's up.
Yes, but also the standard mortgage term is 25 years.
That's probably a more educated guess.
So what they've said to people is, we'll insure your property for the length of your mortgage if you mortgaged it
now.
That on that particular year.
Yeah.
With the assumption that by the end of the 25 years, that house will have no value because it won't be underwater, but it will flood so often.
So regularly that you probably, no one's going to want to fucking live there.
Exactly.
Yeah. I saw a TikTok of a woman and she was like, bought this house. When was Storm Dennis? Was it last year?
No, it was COVID. It was 2020.
So the people that they purchased the house of, it's just flooded. Everything, the whole house. Local river burst its banks really badly. House. They were assured it never flooded. And they found out it flooded in Storm Dennis and the buyers the sellers didn't disclose.
Which, if they asked the question and they didn't disclose it, they can take them to court for.
I don't know. She obviously doesn't go into that much detail.
I'm invested. I need to message her and tell her, do you know that you've got rights?
So I thought that was a pretty standard. You get your pretty standard. At least I remember when we sold Oak Tree, the list of questions that we got from the buyers was like 25 pages.
And that's because there's no duty to disclose anything.
Yeah.
So you don't have to tell them anything, but if you are asked...
So is it a lie that you don't have to disclose if someone died in the house?
If they ask you...
Oh, if they ask you, but you don't have to be like, so... Margaret popped it in the dining room.
No, you don't have to tell them from the outset, but if you are asked, you have to be honest. And if you're not, and there's consequences to it, like that one, you can take them to court for financial recompense or whatever it would be.
Emotional trauma for Margaret's ghost haunting you.
There is a property that's just gone up for sale. Well, no, it's been up for sale for nearly 2 years now, round the corner from us. And it's not sold, and I genuinely believe that partially the reason for it is it's clear that the previous owner died in that property of old age.
It's a probate property.
But they didn't even take the hospital bed out of the creepy bedroom.
The commode is still in the corner.
And they took the pictures to put it up on Rightmove, and it's like, no wonder nobody will offer to pay £250,000 for that property. It has sold though. They put the bins out for the first time this morning when I took Hannah to nursery.
No way.
Yeah, fun fact. Anyway, that's it for this topic. That's all you're getting. And we always say this is not a comprehensive study guide, and it really isn't. Please don't expect to just listen to these podcasts and get through your CeMAP exam, because whilst a couple of people have said it's possible, I would not recommend it. I would recommend that you put the graft in, because otherwise you're going to have to pay a resit fee, which is like £185 and no fun for anybody.
Yeah.
Please go and check out the other free stuff that I offer. So I will link everything in the show notes, which I always feel fancy when I say. But you can get 12 hours worth of free study material in the e-learning platform. You can buy the e-learning platform, which is effectively a textbook replacement, gives you everything you could possibly need to get CeMAP qualified. And of course, you can book onto a fast track course, although as I'm recording this in the middle of December, my next fast track course availability, I think, is March or April.
Woo!
So if you do want to do that, I would recommend that you go on and you bag a space now, because they are just getting full. And if people keep asking, can I go on a waiting list? No, they're full too. So book on a course that's going to suit you for the future. We will be doing one more episode for this year, and then we're going to take a break for Christmas. Yeah.
Ooh.
So that's it from us for this week. Thank you so much for being here, guys. When you listen and leave us a review, press like and send us messages, it makes our entire week.
Yeah, it makes us happy.
And that's it from us. Thank you so much.
Cue outro music.